Hey, Aris, thank you for joining me for this 15-minute NAI interview. Before we jump in, I would love for both of us to introduce ourselves so the listeners know who we are. My name is Daniel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Caps AI, which is an AI operating system that streamlines the due diligence process for private equity through artificial intelligence. Thank you for being here today. Handing over to
Thank
you.
you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, Daniel. So my name is Aris Valtazanos, and I'm the head of data analytics at Oakley Capital, which is a pan-European private equity investor. We focus on four main industries: technology, business services, consumer, and education. I joined Oakley about 1 year ago, and I'm predominantly based in the portfolio team. So my role is to help our portfolio companies and data analytics and AI initiatives. And prior to joining Oakley, I spent around a decade in the broader data and analytics consultancy space. And even before that, I did a PhD in robotics and AI back in the days where AI wasn't such a cool world.
Very cool. Thank you very much. Very relevant background for sure. Maybe kicking things off with the first question, Aris, from your experience, which parts of the deal life cycle, ranging from sourcing, due diligence, closing, and portfolio management, do you believe have the most untapped potential for AI-driven efficiency gains and also insights generation?
So there are definitely plenty of opportunities across the deal life cycle. So definitely wherever there is data and a business problem to solve, there is an opportunity for AI to create value. I mean, from my personal experience and perhaps slight bias from my role, I think the largest opportunity is in the portfolio value creation. And the reason I say this is that this is the stage where you can engage a bit more deeply with your portfolio companies and actually make the most of their own proprietary data, which is often one of their main assets. And that's typically data that you don't have access to prior to having an investment. We've seen this with a few of our own portfolio companies that they've been able to leverage their own data to build data products, either to enhance their offering to their existing customers or to generate new products and therefore target new markets in this way. Of course, a lot of these solutions can be quite specific to certain sectors or industries. So you always need to work with different companies and understand what is important for them, what is important for their sectors, and what's the best way that they can leverage their own data to get the most out of it.
Super interesting. Appreciate the feedback, Aris. Next, I would like to touch on a different topic, which is around kind of what are the key hurdles that you have seen in private equity around adopting and integrating artificial intelligence in operations, whether it's of cultural nature, regulatory nature, or technical nature.
I think the short answer is all of the above, and you often need to tick all of these boxes to see real progress with AI. But if I were to start with the last one you mentioned, the technical side, obviously it's very important for companies to have technically knowledgeable individuals who can guide them through this journey and point them in the right direction and help them avoid some of these pitfalls. At the same time, I've seen a lot of companies fail or struggle because they view this purely as a technical problem. So they end up building a very sophisticated technical solution, but it's always stuck, let's say, in a laboratory or in a back room, and it's not quite connected to the real business value. So for me, the key is not just to build a good technical solution, but also how you link it to real business value and critically how you help non-technical stakeholders engage with those solutions in a meaningful way. I think another challenge I've seen is that a lot of companies are very hesitant because they don't know where to start from. So they think they'll just wait or postpone until others take the lead or until it's perhaps too late for them to catch up with their competitors. And for them, in these cases, I think it's important to just start small, start with what you have, and just identify one or two problems that can add value to your business, and just get going with it and see where you land.
You mentioned one interesting element there that it's key to also see the upside of AI, right? And transition that into language the investment team also understands, and that probably translates into kind of ROI, right? Which is typically what investment professionals look at for their own investments. On this topic, how exactly do you guys internally measure kind of ROI? And if you do measure ROI, are there other metrics that you would recommend looking at to really measure the impact of AI solutions?
Absolutely. I think it's a great question. And I mean, again, the short answer is you need to have some sort of financial metric that you're aiming towards, because ultimately, if there's no financial benefit, there's a question of why are you actually doing this? Why are you investing time and money and effort in something? For a lot of problems, you need to quite clear up front what is the specific financial metric that you'll aim to target, like increased revenue, reducing cost, or something else. Having said that, in a lot of cases, there are some other like non-financial or more operational functional metrics which are just as important and may indirectly have a financial benefit for a business. For instance, for a lot of portfolio companies that are relatively early in their data journey, just getting some basic data integration in place, building some basic dashboards that can help them give good visibility is hugely valuable for the business. It may not be as easy to ascribe a monetary value to that, but just being able to overcome silos or having better transparency is already super important for a lot of businesses. So again, it's important to balance the two and obviously think of the direct financial impact, but also the indirect benefits and functional improvements that AI solutions can bring.
Got it. Another interesting point you touched on earlier was around kind of the regulatory hurdles, right? So clearly in this sector, right, data security compliance is key. That's the first question we basically get from any investment firm we work with. What do you see the biggest challenge, around AI-driven workflows in that context, and what best practices would you recommend when you kind of like procure such a technology?
Absolutely, and I think touching on one of my earlier answers where I said that working with portfolio companies to make the most of their data is where we see a lot of the opportunity. At the same time, a lot of this data that is high value tends to be the one that has also a lot of constraints from a security perspective. So we're talking about personally identifiable information, sensitive fields. So whenever data has such fields, everyone must be really careful around where this is stored, how it is processed to ensure that you meet all the various regulatory requirements that are in place. So often, like a lot of the guidelines in this instance is to remove or anonymize anything that is sensitive or is not really needed for your analysis. That often gives comfort to a lot of the stakeholders, but it also gives you peace of mind from a regulatory perspective. And also be very clear, like where the data will be stored and processed, because especially now when you're working across different regions, sometimes you need to store it in one country and keep it there and not make sure it doesn't cross any borders where the data regulation might be different. Furthermore, for a lot of sectors, there are additional constraints around what kinds of outputs models should produce and how will they be consumed by the businesses and what kind of decisions they might affect. So in those cases, it's important to know when you design a solution, what the output will be and how it will be consumed. And at the same time, ensuring that solutions can be fully auditable. So any kind of prediction or output that is made, you can clearly trace it back to its source and be able to explain exactly how an algorithm arrives at those answers. So having this kind of end-to-end security traceability, understanding exactly which fields you're processing and why is really critical for all modern AI applications.
On that note, Aris, when AI does become like a crucial part in the investment process, right? How do you at Oakley kind of assure that investment committees and other stakeholders in the portfolio companies really feel confident and informed about the AI-driven insights and output that is generated by the platform?
Yes, it's a good question, and I think there's definitely an education piece in explaining how these models work and how they will be consumed. Because a lot of people view these models as a big black box that you don't really understand how it works. So it's really important before you actually build a solution that the end users are aware of how exactly it's going to work and how is it going to be consumed. I think going back a few years, even before this whole generative AI wave started, like this has always been a concern, even when we're dealing with much simpler models. So I remember, 5, 10 years ago, where the state-of-the-art models were like, boosted trees or random forests. People would still go for sometimes simpler models like linear or logistic regression, because even though they may not have been as powerful from a predictive perspective, they were much more auditable and easier to explain. So there's always been sort of this trade-off, like how powerful a model is versus how easily auditable and explainable it is, and giving comfort to the end users that this is something they can use. Of course, in recent years, there have been other techniques around model explainability, which have helped balance the two and help you get the best of both worlds. But especially with this new wave of AI models, which are now talking about billions of parameters, and often, you just try inputs and see what kind of outputs you get. I think it's even more important to be aware of these constraints and these principles. So always try to keep all other things equal, your models as simple, as clean as possible, and think about how they're going to be consumed and what the outputs will ultimately look like and who will they be used by.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate the feedback. You touched a little bit there on kind of how immense progress the models made over last years. Now, looking forward, 5 years down the line, where do you see the biggest gaps, opportunities for AI in private equity?
Yeah, so I think perhaps we should try and break it down in private equities, like for the funds themselves, and then what it means for portfolio companies. So I think on the fund side, it's clear that it's a very emergent area, and as you will know better than I do, a lot, or if not all, of the private equity funds are looking for ways to leverage this technology and see benefits in their own deal making process. I think it's clear also from what I've seen at Oakley and what from discussions with other data leads and other P funds, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of experimentation, people trying to figure things out. But I think it's fair to say no one has really cracked it yet. People are still trying to see what works in what specific use cases. I think people are trying to break down the problems as much as they can, because they realize there's no solution that just works out of the box for all possible use cases. So it's important, depending on your fund and what the priorities are, like find the real specific use cases where these kinds of solutions add value. Start with a small group of people, and then if you see good results, then start rolling this out more broadly. So I think this is where things are at there. On the other hand, on the portfolio side, again, there's companies at different stages of their journey. Some companies are a bit more advanced, already doing quite advanced things with AI and analytics. Others are still earlier on in their journey, and that's often something we're trying to balance as a private equity investor, to kind of support companies at all stages of their data journey. I think for those that are still in the early stages, the message is that you shouldn't delay. You should start and work with what you have. I mean, often the first steps in your journey can feel less glamorous than a lot of the fancy AI techniques we're seeing today. It involves getting your data in order, getting some basic transparency across the organization. But it's really these first steps that will enable you to get the most of more advanced techniques later on in your journey. So find the right problems, and also invest in the people that will own and build these solutions. Because as we discussed earlier, it's never just a technology problem. It's always a mix of technology, process, culture, and people.
That is a nice segue in my last question, Aris. And you touched a little bit on it earlier, that it's just about getting started as quickly as you can and making that start. What would you say when you now speak to kind of an emerging manager, smaller PE firm, who maybe think, okay, this is just a technology for some of the bigger guys, like bigger firms like Oakley, for instance. How should they approach this topic if they really want to adopt AI in their deal processes?
Absolutely. So I think as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to first of all standardize your internal data. So I think a lot of funds, they may not have a standard ways of capturing their deals, their process. So even just getting a CRM in place and critically ensuring all the investment professionals adhere to it and record their deal notes, their interactions in a consistent way is a hugely important first step in a lot of these processes. As I said, to then being able to move to more advanced use cases further down the line. So I think, this is something that I believe all funds and managers should be doing regardless of their size or focus. And I think the other point, as I mentioned earlier, is focus on specific use cases that matter to you depending on the type of your fund. Like in some cases, you might need to lean in a bit more on your investment professionals. In other cases, there will be some opportunities with your IR team. In other cases, it might be fund finance. But often, people try to solve all the problems at once and end up feeling a little bit stuck. I think, breaking it down into different use cases, understanding what needs to be done in each case, what are some low-hanging fruit, let's say, in different areas where you can start and gain the trust of business stakeholders can be a very important first step in that journey.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Aris. This has been super, super valuable. Thank you for your time and sharing your insights. I really appreciate you being part of the 15 minutes of AI and private equity series. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for the discussion and the great questions.
Thank you.